One couple has bought this centuries-old ruin for roughly $170,000. Leaving their life in Paris behind, they head to the French countryside with an ambitious vision, putting their savings into renovating it all by themselves. The catch: they have absolutely no prior experience. They step into a brutal journey against a failing foundation, dangerous mistakes, and the physical toll of doing it all by hand. This is the story of how two beginners pull it off. But reaching this dream means surviving day one. Before they can even touch the interior, the adjoining barn must be secured. The original roof is failing, and without a complete replacement, the entire building is at risk of collapse. To keep early costs in check, they decide to handle the demolition themselves. For a couple with no construction experience, it is a terrifying first test. They paid around $170,000 for the property. It feels like a steal, but to truly make it a bargain, they have mapped out a strict master plan. Finish the entire renovation in just 2 years, with a total construction budget capped at $120,000. But reality hits fast. Decades of weight and moisture have left the original beams severely compromised. Given the complexity, they are forced to step back and hire professional builders. The crew realigns the warped framework and seals the roof with traditional slate tiles. They finish the work by installing a skylight that floods Etienne's future office with natural light. After just 1 week, the barn is finally protected from the damp Loire Valley weather, but their bank account is already $10,000 lighter. With the structure sealed, the renovation can finally move inside. The first step is to define the new layout. The ground floor will be opened up into a large kitchen and dining area, leading into a central living room with a new bathroom. The adjoining barn will hold a master suite and Issa's workshop. Upstairs, low ceilings and the staircase limit the space, so the layout is confined to 2 bedrooms and a shared bathroom. Finally, a new mezzanine will be framed above the workshop to serve as Etienne's office. Their strategy is to tackle the upper level first. With that goal in mind, they begin by tearing it all down. Since these interior walls carry zero weight from the roof, the demolition moves fast, without the need for extra safety measures. Next comes the floor, where they pry up roughly 1,500 terracotta tiles by hand. Some will be reused, but the rest will be sold for up to $1 each in the secondary market. A $1,000 win that will finance the new insulation. But a structural problem quickly stalls their momentum. Once the thick new insulation is installed, it will completely block the door. The only solution is to shift the entire opening left, cutting directly into the exterior wall. To make the new doorway, they have to cut through the house's original tuffeau limestone. It is formed from fine marine sediment compressed over time, which makes it soft enough to saw through while still strong enough to hold up the house. But this porous stone has a major vulnerability. It acts like a sponge, naturally absorbing moisture. Standard cement would act like a waterproof seal, trapping that moisture and causing the stone to rot from within. Instead, they mix a traditional mortar by hand using sand, water, and lime. Unlike cement, it allows the trapped moisture to safely evaporate, ensuring the ancient walls stay healthy and intact as construction starts on the right jam. To save money, 40-pound blocks salvaged from the left side of the wall are recycled into the new framework. This heavy labor is a massive shift from their previous life in a 300-square-foot apartment in Paris. Right now, Isa works a full-time job to fund the renovation, while Etienne handles most daily construction alone. However, rebuilding a house of this scale with no prior experience is simply too much for one person. His friend Pablo steps in to help, but Etienne and Isa know they need long-term backup. To handle the massive workload, they decide to host international volunteers, inviting travelers to stay with them in exchange for help on the site. And the first arrivals will be here soon. In the meantime, working alongside Pablo, the timber lintel is secured and the mortar is set. The new doorway is complete. It's a critical first milestone, but the upper floor is about to test their limits even further. This space was once a grain attic, and the immense weight of the harvests has left the floor bowed. The entire upper floor is supported by beams that are visible from the ground floor. Over time, the floor has sunk in certain areas. Their plan is to install new wooden joists on top to make the surface flat again. To avoid losing ceiling height, the ends of the joists will be cut at the edges. Finally, they will fill the empty gaps with pieces of wood and screw them directly into the structural beams underneath. But placing and leveling these joists is a grueling process that takes up to an hour for every single one. Facing yet another physically exhausting and demoralizing task, Etienne relies once again on his friend Pablo to help share the load. Before sealing the structure, and with Isa back in the site, a resilient foam band is applied across the top of every joist to prevent the future floor from squeaking. Then, the empty voids are filled with cellulose wadding, a recycled paper product that will dampen the transfer of sound to the floor below. The subfloor is then sealed with rigid OSB. At nearly an inch thick, these solid panels ensure the floor won't flex or bow under heavy foot traffic. But before the floor is sealed, they leave behind something no one will see for decades: a time capsule. Inside, a handwritten letter, photographs, a USB drive holding the story of this renovation, and one last detail: a sealed box, its contents unknown, waiting to be discovered. They finally have a flat, safe surface to stand on. But looking up reveals their next massive obstacle. Over the centuries, the roof rafters have warped, making a level ceiling impossible. To correct this, they install adjustable metal hangers that support channels strong enough to carry the weight of the insulation. To make sure every hanger is set to the exact same depth, the external ones are placed first. Then, a grid of string lines is pulled tight between them as a visual guide. But this meticulous process quickly turns into a major setback. They inadvertently used two different models of metal hangers. While they look nearly identical, Their clipping mechanisms are misaligned by just a fraction of an inch. This tiny discrepancy prevents the horizontal channels from snapping in straight, meaning a full week of painstaking work must be entirely undone and restarted. Once the framework is finally corrected, they can install the thermal insulation. They choose wood fiber panels. These are made from tightly compressed wood chips, a dense material specifically designed to stop outside heat from pushing its way indoors. This thick layer is vital because the roof is the house's most exposed surface. In the summer, the sun beats down on it all day, and in the winter, heat naturally rises and tries to escape through the top. By heavily insulating the ceiling, they're essentially putting a lid on the house to keep the temperature stable year-round. With this first project finished, attention shifts to the ground level, where they aim to expand the doorway to create an open layout. This wall, however, carries part of the building itself, so cutting into it is one of the riskiest jobs in the entire renovation. If the structure is not supported properly, the second floor could collapse. That is why Etienne brings in Régis, a professional mason, to guide him through the process. At the same time, the first volunteers arrive. Dominique and Felipe, two travelers from Chile ready to take on the heavy lifting. With the weight supported by metal props, each limestone block is carefully cut and removed, then saved for the many repairs to come. When Isa returns from work, Etienne surprises her with the remarkable progress. The first stage is completed safely, but the most dangerous step is still ahead. They have to lift two 150-pound steel beams into place to act as the new lintels. At this point, even a single mistake could have serious consequences. And they almost make one. 150 pounds of steel teeter on the edge, ready to fall directly onto the floor below. Still shaken by the scare, they have no choice but to reset the beam onto the stone and secure it in place. Having learned from that mistake, the second beam goes in far more smoothly. But before the opening is finished, the gap above the beam must be tightly packed with lime and sand to prevent the floor above from sagging. As the metal supports are removed, the struggle is over, and the team can finally breathe, leaving behind a structure that is 100 times stronger than before. Unfortunately, there's still more walls they need to break through. The solid rear wall leaves this side of the house in shadow by afternoon, so the couple plan to cut two new entrances. The first opening will lead directly into the living room. But instead of the soft limestone used elsewhere, this section of the wall is built from slate, a material much harder to penetrate. This is where Régis steps back in again, joined by his colleague Thomas, another professional mason. For Etienne and Isa, this renovation has become a massive, hands-on apprenticeship. When they first began, their DIY skills were essentially zero. So instead of hiring contractors to work in their absence, they seek out mentors like Régis and Thomas, experts who don't just complete the task, but are willing to pass on their secrets. With the first door finished, the work moves to the kitchen. Here, a much larger section of the wall must come down to accommodate a double sliding door. The couple took a massive risk by pre-ordering these custom frames months ago. If the masonry isn't perfect to the inch, the expensive units will be completely useless. To guarantee a perfect fit, the technique used to build the stone jambs is essential. Instead of just stacking stones, they alternate the blocks, one across the wall's width and the next along its length. This crossing pattern allows the stones to distribute the house's weight evenly. Once the door frame is complete, the moment of truth arrives. Fortunately, Thomas and Regis's precision pays off, and the entire unit slides perfectly into place. To complement the new kitchen opening, the couple sets out to build an outdoor wooden deck. But while the main house is coming together, there is an entire second building waiting for its own renovation: the barn. The work begins at the very bottom, where everything must be perfectly prepared before the concrete is poured. If a mistake is made here, they won't be able to solve it later. First, pipes are installed beneath the dirt, then the whole floor is leveled using a technique known as sand blinding. Replacing the rocky dirt with a smoother surface protects the plastic vapor barrier from being punctured and creates a flat bed for the new insulation boards. These high-density foam panels are essential because they are able to support the weight of the concrete without deforming over time. Finally, a welded wire mesh is laid down to act as a structural skeleton, reinforcing the slab to prevent future cracks. To be safe, Etienne had ordered an extra cubic yard of concrete just in case his measurements were off. But as the concrete is being poured, he realizes it is rising much higher than expected. Before he can warn the operator to hold it back, the entire load is already pumped inside the building. After letting it harden outside, they have to haul it away piece by piece. This mistake costs them a whole day of work. But what they soon discover inside the main house could cost them the entire building. The couple finds that moisture has been rising through the limestone for decades. To stop the house from failing, the entire bottom section has to be rebuilt. To make sure the wall is faultlessly protected, they reuse the slate saved earlier from the demolition of the living room doorway. Unlike limestone, this stone is dense and waterproof, creating a solid barrier that finally blocks the moisture for good. Fixing this house-wide infection costs them several weeks, and the renovation begins to feel stuck. But then an unexpected opportunity changes everything. Their neighbor offers them the plot next door for only $1,000, so the couple decides to buy it. In one move, their outdoor space doubles to 16,000 square feet. This expansion gives them the room they need for their ultimate goal: growing enough food to become self-sufficient. Before any planting begins, the raw terrain needs serious infrastructure. First, water and electrical lines must be buried, so the whole plot can be connected before the landscaping begins. Once the lines are buried, a large greenhouse is assembled to protect fragile crops and extend the growing season. But a garden this size needs a huge amount of water, and the property's original stone well is failing. The couple brings in a specialized team and discovers that previous owners had used the well as a trash dump. To choose where the new well should be dug, the couple calls in a professional dowser who uses metal rods to search for water beneath the yard. According to this old belief, the rods react when they pass over an underground source. But whether this approach can lead them to water or not, only the digging will tell. Joined by Noel, a local professional, Etienne, Isa, and their friends begin testing that promise for themselves. They use a manual earth auger, a heavy metal drill that has to be twisted into the ground by hand. At first, the ground offers no reason to believe. They go deeper and deeper, pulling up the same dry soil, with nothing to suggest that water is waiting below. The dowser's promise begins to feel uncertain. Then the texture shifts. The earth comes up darker, heavier, and wetter, until it finally turns to mud. And after hours of physical labor, 20 feet down, they find water. To protect this crucial structure, a PVC pipe is placed inside the hole, while a concrete box shelters it from external debris. The garden's water supply is finally secured, but the coming winter forces them back inside. They must now renovate the stone chimney for a heat source before the cold sets in. But instead of rebuilding the open fireplace, they will install a wood stove to maximize the home's thermal efficiency. While an open fire loses most of its heat straight up the flue, a stove is designed to radiate warmth back into the room. To restore the rear wall, the couple reuses 280 terracotta floor tiles salvaged from the upstairs demolition. Up until now, the renovation has been about saving the building from collapse. But with the structure secured and heated, they must now carve an actual house out of the empty space. A massive interior build-out that will drain the very last of their renovation funds. Etienne faces the grueling task of drywalling over 1,000 square feet of angled ceilings entirely alone. But as their funds run out, he is forced to take a part-time job. Stripped of his building time, a one-month project drags into 3. Once the insulation is done, the open attic is divided into separate rooms. A framework of metal studs is built to shape out 2 bedrooms and a shared bathroom. The long-term plan for these upstairs bedrooms is to turn them into a maison d'hôte, a small French guest house. In France, that means more than just spare rooms. It is a hosted place to stay, with breakfast included, designed to welcome travelers into the home itself. These rooms could one day become a small source of income, helping them gradually recover some of the money they have spent bringing the house back to life. Once the surface is ready, the raw drywall is sealed with primer, so the paint will go on evenly. For the final color, the couple chooses bright white paint because it reflects daylight deeper into the room, making the space feel brighter and the old timber beams stand out more clearly. Yet, the house is only one part of the project. The attached barn still waits to be rebuilt. While the house was a battle of deconstruction, the barn is a blank slate. It's pure creation, giving them the freedom to build wilder ideas, like an indoor catamaran net. Because the new interior walls aren't structural, the couple has to anchor the heavy metal hangers with 9-inch bolts that reach all the way back into the 200-year-old stone. As soon as the first rope is installed, Etienne can't resist a test dive, taking a leap of faith into the net while the setup is still technically unfinished. With its integrity confirmed, a secondary red rope is added for redundant safety, completing this unique floating lounge. This creative detour was rewarding, but a home needs more than just a net. The final push is about finishing the actual livable spaces. They must now transform the remaining empty shell into a suite, a mezzanine office, and a workshop, the rooms that will finally complete their vision for the barn. With the suite finally complete, the focus shifts to the spaces that will shape their everyday life: Issa's workshop and Etienne's office. To brighten the workshop, Etienne repurposes a structural beam saved from the early demolition, turning it into a custom chandelier. But brightening the room is only half the task. In a house shaped by awkward angles and tight corners, standard furniture rarely fits. So, to make the most of every inch, they bring in Mathieu, a local woodworker who builds one-of-a-kind pieces from salvaged trees. He creates a workspace for Isa that fits the walls perfectly. This workshop is meant to support Isa's professional work, giving her a dedicated space to make handmade soaps, leathercraft, and other handcrafted creations. Above it, the mezzanine that will become Etienne's office also needs careful finishing. To secure its open edge without blocking the light, a custom railing is fabricated from a welded metal frame threaded with quarter-inch rebar in a crisscross pattern. Just like the workshop below, the office requires custom furniture. Between the sloped roof and the massive original beams, standard pieces simply won't fit. With the barn done, the renovation moves back into the main house, where the remaining rooms still need to be finished. Budget pressure is visible even underfoot. Instead of covering the OSB subfloor, Etienne and Isa decide to make it the final surface. Every screw head is filled with wood putty, then the boards are sanded smooth, and 2 coats of varnish turn the raw floor into something durable enough for daily life. They are finally in the last stretch of the project. Their goal now is simple: turn this empty floor into a livable space. Reaching this finish line hasn't been easy. What was supposed to be a 2-year renovation project has ended up stretching into 4. But despite the old house demanding far more work than they ever planned, Etienne and Isa pulled off the impossible. By doing the grueling labor themselves, they managed to keep their renovation costs anchored right around their $120,000 budget. But they didn't do it alone. This massive transformation would have been impossible without the friends, mentors, and volunteers who stood by their side to share the load. In the end, the worksite has finally crossed the line into a home. The ancient stone is still there, but today it holds something new. Years of effort, shared laughter, and hard-earned lessons. The main house is ready to receive its first guests. And the barn, once a fragile structure on the verge of collapse, is now a space where they can live, work, and thrive. Outside, their dream of a simpler life is taking root in the garden. 4 years ago, they moved here to save a 200-year-old ruin. But by the time the dust finally settled, the house had done just as much for them. It taught them the trade, brought a community to their doorstep, and gave them a completely new way of living.